The story opens on the Ringdarum Kingdom, a huge, sprawling city that seems peaceful until the scene shifts to the capital, Astrian. A guard up on the wall looks completely panicked as he yells out that the Demon Lord's army is attacking, telling everyone they need to get ready for a serious fight. Another soldier joins in, screaming for the troops to intercept them since this army is led by a powerful Demon Lord's general. As the battle starts heating up in the back, a young priestess prays to a god named Ripis to bless their weak souls, while the main guy is already catching his breath. He's huffing and puffing with his sword drawn, trying to process the situation. He looks at a fallen monster and realizes it's just a lower-class demon, but even so he admits the thing was pretty tough. He's struggling because he can't find any clear weaknesses in these enemies. Another fighter nearby mentions that this kind of strength is expected from an army led by a general, which makes the main guy just smile. He looks back and tells the others it's really no problem, acting totally calm despite the danger. The main guy looks over at the gates, knowing they have some backup. A soldier shouts that the big shots are finally here. Everyone looks as the famous hero Levin shows up with a smug look on his face. He thinks it's almost funny that a demon general would try to attack, especially while he's in town. Garius laughs, saying Levin looks way too happy, but Noelle isn't having it. She tells Garius to take this seriously or he'll die. Garius just laughs it off while Pal sighs, clearly used to the drama, while the young merchant, Wish, jumps in to say everything will be fine since with all 5 of them together, they can beat anyone. He's fired up, reminding them they have to protect the town, even though he's just 18. Garius laughs and shoves the kid, joking about how Wish talks like a big-time hero despite being so weak. Noelle ignores the kid and looks at Garius, telling him he really shouldn't take this whole situation so lightly. Levin seems confused while Wish just stands there, asking why no one cares about what he has to say. Noelle gets serious, explaining that the enemy commander they're facing is Liliam of the Abyssal Silver Ice. She tells them Liliam is a total monster who stands out even among the other high-ranking demon generals. Legends say she has an insane amount of mana and can use the highest level of ice magic, basically making her the most feared woman in the entire Demon Lord's army. Instead of being scared, Levin just grins and says he'd love to fight someone like that, while everyone else watches Wish show off all the healing potions and gear he's got packed and ready. He's got a huge smile on his face, telling the party they can leave all the support stuff to him. Wish stays positive, saying if the hero's party wins then a lot of people will be saved, but Levin just tells him not to get in the way. The guy gets even harsher, telling Wish his only real job is to pick up loot and materials from the monsters they take down. Levin asks if even a slowpoke like him can handle a simple task like that, and Wish just nods and says he can, but it's pretty obvious to everyone that Levin is acting really on edge. Levin tells everyone to move out while Noelle mentions it's a big battle, so the stress makes sense. Wish just follows, thinking he can't be a burden. The fighting starts immediately, and the party begins absolutely ripping through the monsters in their path. Levin wipes some blood off his sword, complaining that they've only run into low-level trash demons this whole time. He asks where the hell their main target Liliam is hiding, while Noelle starts to get a bad feeling that something is off. She looks at her staff and tells the group she's not picking up any trace of Liliam's mana signature at all, which leaves Levin wondering if that's even possible while Wish stands in the back, totally stunned by the news. Wish tries to stay calm by looking at the emblem on his gear. He keeps telling himself everything is fine as long as he has this mark. The demons they're fighting are definitely part of Liliam's elite army. The monsters look way more vicious than the usual trash mobs. Way up in the mountains, there's a hidden camp tucked away, and someone is looking out wondering where the hell they ended up down in the camp. Demon soldiers are busy moving crates and barrels around like they're getting ready for something big. Liliam is just sitting there looking stressed. She admits that from where she's standing, it's impossible to tell if they're actually winning. As a high-ranking executive of the Demon King's army, she's starting to freak out. She looks pretty convinced that things are going south fast. She spots a soldier nearby and calls out to him, making sure she's got his attention while he's right in the middle of working. Liliam immediately starts sweating, asking him for a status report on how the battle is actually looking out there. She gets right in the guy's face, desperately asking if they're winning the fight, almost like she's begging for some good news. The soldier must have told her what she wanted to hear because she gets all excited. She's totally relieved that they have the upper hand. Liliam starts laughing, bragging about how humans aren't even a big deal after all. She says it makes sense since she's the one in charge. Then she turns to the soldier and tells him this win is all thanks to his hard work. She lets him know she's expecting even bigger things from him from here on out. The second the guy isn't looking, she starts sweating. She's just glad she won because the other executives would never stop making fun of her. She remembers how those guys are always looking for any excuse to get on her case. Liliam knows demon society is all about merit, and she gets why nobles with huge mana pools act all tough. but it still pisses her off that they think they can look down on a commoner like her. She starts shaking just thinking about how badly they'd treat her back in the demon realm if she actually lost a fight, so she pumps herself up, yelling that she's going to win this battle because losing isn't an option. She's so caught up in her own head that the soldier just looks at her confused, asking why she hasn't left yet. Liliam watches the battlefield closely and says she finally gets what's going on, but then she totally loses her cool when she hears the hero is actually there right now. The whole hero party is busy ganging up on one tiny low-level demon, and Liliam watches the fight from a distance, thinking it's weird they need everyone just for one weakling. She starts laughing while the soldier next to her says the hero isn't even that impressive. Then she spots someone else and asks if that's another companion, noticing how weak they look. It's Wish, and he's just relieved they got such a good haul that'll sell for a high price. Suddenly someone starts screaming at a girl to move faster, calling her lower-class trash. It's a young girl carrying a huge basket of swords, and she's shaking while she apologizes. Wish just stands there watching as Levin clicks his tongue and walks away with the poor girl. The protagonist looks on in total shock, saying how they can do such terrible things. He jumps right into the action, landing a brutal hit on the demon. He's sweating as it sinks in that he's facing a lesser demon, a low-tier monster that's way tougher than it looks. He lets out a shout and swings his blade with everything he's got, managing to drive the creature back, giving him a second to look back and yell at the girl to hurry up and run. The sword carrier girl is stuck on the ground, saying her back is messed up and she can't even get up. The guy realizes things are looking really bad, knowing that just holding these monsters off isn't going to be enough to save them. He decides he has to finish them off right here, but as he looks at the beast, he starts questioning if he can actually do this alone, since this is an enemy that usually takes a whole hero party to bring down. Wish stares at the monster, thinking there's just no way a merchant like him can win, but he stops and tells himself to think, wondering if there's anything he can actually do. He looks the beast over, desperately trying to find a weakness, when he suddenly sees a glow and wonders where the light is coming from. He realizes this isn't like normal magic and notices it's coming from the monster's head, thinking the glow feels strangely warm as he tries to figure out what it is. The guy suddenly moves, looking completely shocked by what he's seeing, knowing that if he hesitates now, he's definitely going to die. He decides it's all or nothing and charges straight at the creature, putting every bit of strength he has into a strike aimed right at that light. Wish leaps into the air with everything he's got, screaming for the monster to take this hit as he slams his weapon right into the glowing weak spot, triggering a huge explosion of light that blows everyone away. The elf girl watching from the sidelines completely loses it, yelling out in total shock at the sheer power of the blast. Even the demon looks confused for a second before it goes down, leaving the nearby soldier just staring in awe. Wish collapses onto the dirt, gasping for air and feeling relieved that it's finally over. He tells himself he got lucky, but he's just glad he managed to keep the girl safe. Nearby adventurers start whispering, wondering who this random guy with the knife is and if he's actually some famous warrior. The crowd starts cheering for him, and some people even start asking if he's the real hero. Garius is standing there with his jaw dropped, asking if everyone's kidding because he can't believe a merchant took down a demon in a single hit. Someone calls out to Levin, who just stands there watching with a serious look. Wish points toward the distance and suggests they escort the girl back to town. She just stands there looking unsure as Levin looks completely disgusted by the idea. He asks Wish what he's talking about, saying he doesn't see why he should bother saving some random lower-class citizen. Levin tells Wish to forget her and just focus on gathering monster parts. He's worried their pay will go down, leaving Wish trying to stop him. Wish snaps back, saying it doesn't matter who she is. He yells, asking what someone's social status has to do with saving a life, but Levin isn't even listening anymore. He notices some signals in the sky and says it's time to use their trump card. He points back toward the city and says time's up. He tells Wish they're heading back to the defensive wall right now. Over by the wall, the elf girl sees something huge happening and loses it, asking what that massive power is and why it's so strong. She realizes the hero's party is behind it and starts shaking. She screams about how terrifying they are while the rest of the crowd watches in total shock as a blinding light starts to fill the area. Soldiers on the wall start panicking, yelling for everyone to take cover because something massive is about to fire. The elf girl catches a glimpse of the massive barrel and realizes it's a cannon. She can't believe they actually have something like that, especially since she recognizes it as the Volvarn. It's some top-tier heavy artillery built by a reincarnator, specifically designed to wreck high-ranking demons. And she knows exactly how much damage that weapon has already dealt to the demon lord's army. It's a total game-changer on the battlefield. She completely loses her cool, yelling at them and asking what the hell they were thinking bringing out something that crazy. The girl keeps screaming, calling them idiots because she's convinced there's no way anyone can win against a weapon like that. Even the demons nearby are starting to freak out. She looks over and sees them realizing just how bad their situation has become. The demon forces give up and call for a full retreat, running away from the wall as fast as they can to avoid getting blasted. Up on the wall, one of the soldiers points out that Liliam's army is finally running away. Everyone watches as the enemy disappears. The soldiers start celebrating, cheering at the top of their lungs because they actually pulled off a victory. But Levin just looks bored. He says the Demon Lord's army was pretty weak and that the whole fight was honestly a bit half-assed. The guards look around the battlefield in shock, one of them asking if that was actually Liliam's army they just beat, while Levin brushes it off and says who knows. One of the soldiers celebrates by smacking Wish on the back and telling him he was awesome out there, which just makes Wish laugh nervously. Levin watches the praise with a bitter look on his face, muttering that the win was just a total fluke before clicking his tongue in annoyance. The scene moves to the tavern later that night. The group heads inside to grab some drinks and wind down after the fight. Wish freezes up and looks completely stunned, barely able to process what he's hearing as he asks them what they just said. Levin sits there looking smug, asking if Wish is deaf and confirming that he heard him right the first time. He looks Wish right in the eyes and tells him he's officially kicked out of the party. He doesn't need him around anymore and just wants him gone. Wish stands there trembling, asking why this is happening so out of the blue, but Levin just grunts like he couldn't care less. Noelle doesn't even look at him as she chimes in, saying the only reason they kept him around this long was to have a baggage carrier, which allowed the rest of them to travel light and stay focused on the combat. They were basically just using him for his gear. Wish snaps back at them, asking why they're even bringing up his fighting skills now of all times, and he's forced to admit that he knows he's weak, but he still feels like he has some value since Levin just cuts him off, telling him not to get a big head just because a lowly baggage carrier helped out some commoners. Because at the end of the day, Levin thinks he's the one actually saving the world and reminds Wish they aren't on the same level. The street outside is dead quiet as the night goes on just empty buildings and cobblestone. Wish walks away from the tavern by himself, shoulders slumped as he lets out a heavy, frustrated sigh. He can't wrap his head around the fact that they saw him that way, especially since he really thought he was helping the party out. While he's standing there wondering what he's even supposed to do with his life now, a voice suddenly calls out to him. So he turns around to see the timid sword carrier girl standing there, nervously asking if he's really Wish. Wish is totally caught off guard by her showing up, and he just blinks while asking who she's supposed to be. The sword carrier girl bows down deep, telling Wish how much she appreciates him helping her out earlier, but Wish just gets all flustered, waving his hands while saying it was really nothing and he didn't do anything special. The girl isn't having it and tells him he's wrong, because he was the only one who even tried to save her life. Wish just gives her a warm smile and tells her not to worry about it because he's just glad she's safe now. He waves goodbye as she walks off, but then he stops to look at his hand, realizing that deep down, he always wanted to be a merchant people actually like, and that's the whole reason he left his village. Looking back at the day he first set out, he remembers being a kid and deciding he was going to be a great merchant just like his grandpa. He thinks to himself that the person he wants to be wouldn't hesitate for a second, even when things look bad, so he just smirks, finally over being kicked out of the party and ready to do his own thing. Wish locks in and tells himself he's just gotta stick to his own beliefs and keep pushing forward. He's thinking about everyone across the globe and how he wants to make their lives better. So he pumps himself up and decides it's finally time to get down to some real merchant work. He looks out at the town and says that since his mind is made up, he's gotta start getting ready for the trip, pacing around and wondering if Luvich would be a good spot for a base while he figures out his next move. With a huge grin on his face, he tells the world to just wait and see what he's got coming, and he takes off running, promising himself that he's going to be a top-tier merchant no matter what happens. Looking out over the horizon, he's determined to make the whole world a way better place. Meanwhile, the elf girl from the crowd is walking away looking pretty annoyed, muttering to herself she's completely losing it, complaining that she almost got killed because of everything that just went down. Back at the Demon Lord's castle, Liliam is throwing a total fit. She's yelling about why she was the one picked to invade a human town when she's usually just in charge of domestic stuff and has zero experience fighting people. She starts taking her anger out on a stone pillar, giving it a massive kick while shouting that making her a commander in the first place was a huge mistake. Liliam's foot connects with the solid stone with a loud thud, and she realizes pretty quickly that kicking a giant rock was a bad move. She starts screaming and clutching her foot in total pain. While she's hopping around on one leg like an idiot, a voice from the side asks if she's trying out some kind of new dance, and turns out a tall guy in a hood was watching the whole time. He laughs and says she's back from her mission way earlier than he thought she'd be. Liliam looks completely caught off guard as she realizes it's Dwayne, the supreme commander of the entire Demon Lord's army standing right there. He just looks at her and sighs, saying he guesses he shouldn't be surprised by her showing up like this. Dwayne starts mocking her, acting like it's a big dilemma, and saying that taking down a whole fortress city was probably just too much for her to handle, leaving Liliam standing there looking completely annoyed. Dwayne sighs, mocking the fact that she's supposed to be an ice magic user while she's acting like this, making it pretty clear he thinks she hasn't changed a bit, calling her just as quick-tempered as she's always been. Liliam snaps back, demanding to know why she was even assigned to the invasion when she clearly wasn't the right fit, but Dwayne just brushes it off, saying he knows all about her circumstances. He doesn't seem to care though, reminding her that in the demon world, strength is the only thing that actually matters at the end of the day. He drops a bombshell, explaining that the whole invasion was just a test for her, leaving Liliam completely shocked. She starts panicking, asking if he's really about to demote her again after everything that just happened. But Dwayne tells her it's actually way worse than a demotion. He looks her right in the eye and says there's straight up no place left for her in the Demon Lord's army anymore. He asks if she understands the results of her failure, leaving Liliam standing there as the reality of being fired sinks in. Wish is out in the mountains just taking it all in, thinking about how blue the sky looks and how fresh the air feels. He's feeling pretty good about things so far, noting that his journey has been going really smooth. But then he stops to think. He left town specifically to head for the merchant city, and yet he finds himself standing in the middle of some old ruins, wondering why there's a place like this out here. He looks around at the broken stone walls, asking himself if there was supposed to be an abandoned castle in this area, but suddenly he hears someone sobbing nearby. Liliam is actually nearby, totally losing it and panicking that she's gotten herself lost. Wish spots her sitting on a rock with her head down, crying her eyes out in the middle of the rubble. He rushes over to help, asking if she's alright and if she's ended up lost just like him, but then he catches a good look at her and she looks up with tears still in her eyes, and Wish immediately notices the pointy ears she's hiding. He loses his cool and jumps back, pulling his sword out while yelling that she's a demon. Liliam points a finger right at Wish and screams, asking if he's really the hero's companion. Before he can even answer, she starts begging him for help while he just stands there looking totally confused. He wonders why a demon is even out here, especially since she looks so weak, and she's just a shaking mess on the ground. She keeps rambling on about something she became, and Wish can't believe his ears when she finally lets it all out. She got fired from the Demon Lord's army. She lets out a massive wail that echoes all through the old ruins, making it clear she's totally lost it. Wish stands over her in shock, screaming back because he can't process the news. He asks her to clarify, repeating the part about her getting fired from the Demon King's army, and Liliam just keeps crying, mentioning that she's now stranded in the middle of human territory. Wish realizes how insane the whole situation is. Finding a demon is rare enough, but finding a fired one is next level. Liliam is having a total meltdown and won't stop crying, leaving Wish standing there wondering what the heck she's even talking about. But then he stops to think for a second because something about this whole scene feels really off. So he starts remembering stuff his old party said about how any demon that can actually talk is usually a high-ranking monster, the kind of upper-class enemy that's way stronger than anything he's seen before, with stats that are just off the charts compared to lower-level ones, especially since their magic doesn't even work the same way. While Wish is deep in thought, Liliam is still blubbering away, looking at him and wondering if he's actually some powerhouse. But she just goes back to crying about how she's doing her best and how life is being way too mean to her. She lets out a huge scream when Wish suddenly pulls something out, though he's just checking a paper and realizing he's got this under control. So he looks her right in the eye and asks what the hell she's supposed to be anyway. Liliam completely stops her crying fit and looks up in shock, asking how he could possibly know who she is. Liliam tries to dry her eyes, explaining that she saw Wish back on the battlefield because she was actually a commander in the Demon Lord's army, but Wish just looks at her with total disbelief, asking if a girl like her was really a commander. That seems to give her a little spark of pride, and she grins while telling him he's got that right. Then she goes into a full pose, announcing she's an executive known as Liliam of the Abyssal Silver Ice, and even offers to let him call her Lady Liliam. Wish isn't buying it at all, telling her that if she's going to lie to him, she should at least try to make it sound believable. He starts lecturing her, saying the real Liliam is supposed to be an ice magic user with a crazy amount of power. So if she were actually the real deal, her leaking mana would have frozen the entire area solid by now. But looking at her, he can't feel even a tiny bit of magic coming off her at all. He gets even more blunt, asking her if she's just some small fry after all, which sends her into another panic as she just hicks and mumbles under her breath, totally defeated and drawing in the dirt like a kid. Liliam just slumps over in the dirt, admitting she's basically just a crappy demon anyway. Wish starts panicking, wondering if he went a bit too hard on her, though he knows he's not really one to talk. She looks down with a serious face, and says she actually used to be a big deal back in the demon realm, explaining how everyone used to call her a super promising rookie and had all these high expectations for her. That's why she worked so hard, determined to support the Demon Lord's army even when she felt totally alone. But she stops herself, looking like she's about to lose it as she repeats those words over and over. Suddenly she starts screaming about how they fired her just for being useless in a fight, calling her old boss a shitty old geezer, while Wish just stands there watching her have a total meltdown. She isn't even finished yet, saying there's actually something way worse that happened, clenching her fists, and telling him the part that really gets under her skin is what they did to her next. Liliam starts flashing back to that day, where a voice asks her if she can already guess the outcome of their meeting, and then the news drops like a ton of bricks as her boss tells her straight up that she's fired. She just stands there repeating the word over and over while some random girl in the back thinks the whole situation is hilarious. Liliam looks over at her, totally caught off guard, and asks who she's even supposed to be, only for the girl to throw up a peace sign and give her a super energetic greeting. She introduces herself as Lummy, bragging about how she's the one who kicked her senpai to the curb to take her spot. And to make it worse, Dwayne tells the others that Lummy is actually capable enough to handle the army on her own. As they all walk away, Lummy looks back one last time just to tell Liliam how incredibly lame she is. Back in the present, Liliam loses her mind and screams about how pissed off she is while remembering them laughing, leaving Wish to just stand there, realizing that being a demon is actually a pretty rough life. Liliam sits there looking pretty annoyed while a little ghost pops up, and she snaps that she definitely doesn't need his pity, but Wish just looks down and starts opening up, telling her the truth is that he was actually a member of the hero's party until just recently, which catches her off guard as he explains how everything went down during that big battle with the Demon King's army the other day. He mentions he couldn't just stand by while a woman was being attacked, and apparently that really annoyed the hero. Wish laughs it off, admitting he got kicked out of the party for it and is just a regular merchant now. He apologizes for the boring story, saying he just felt like he could relate to her, leaving Liliam totally silent. Suddenly, Liliam's face scrunches up like she's about to lose it, and she tells him you too while she starts full-on crying, sobbing about how much he must have suffered through all of that, which leaves Wish just standing there completely shocked by her reaction. Wish is totally panicking and asks her what's wrong all of a sudden, since Liliam is just a mess, sobbing about how she can't stop thinking about how hard things must have been for him. Wish tries to calm her down, telling her she doesn't need to cry, but she just keeps going, saying she understands his pain. She keeps wailing about how much she gets it. While Wish is just standing there trying to get her to wait for a second, it's getting out of hand, so he finally just yells at her to actually listen to him. Suddenly, Liliam stops and says she's made a decision, which leaves Wish looking pretty confused as she looks him right in the eye and tells him she's coming along with him now. She asks what his name is while she starts walking off, and he just blankly tells her it's Wish, but then he snaps out of it, telling her to stop because that's not what he meant at all. He asks why she's even following him, but Liliam just ignores the complaining and asks where they're heading first. Liliam snaps at Wish to actually pay attention to her, but he just sighs and points out that the place is a merchant city. She doesn't care and points the other way, mentioning Luvich is in the opposite direction, which totally catches him off guard. She explains that back when she was in the Demon King's army, she handled all the internal affairs, so she knows every town on the map and can be his guide, even calling him a dummy merchant while she's at it. Wish admits that having a guide would actually be pretty useful, but he still asks why she's so desperate to tag along. Liliam looks back and says it's just frustrating, because they both put in all that work just to get fired for nothing. She gets this look in her eye and says that's exactly why they have to go and show them. She flashes a huge, determined grin, telling him they're going to prove they can make it on their own too. Wish just shakes his head, thinking about how reckless this whole plan sounds, but then he smiles and tells her she's right, seeing her start to tear up again as he realizes she's really had a rough time lately. Wish reaches for his gear and decides that since they're doing this, the first thing they need to do is form a temporary party. And just like that, the two outcasts start their journey together. Walking through the open fields, Wish starts to feel like this could actually be the start of something big. He's feeling pretty good about things, moving along with a light step while setting their sights on the merchant city as their first real destination. But that's when everything goes south. Or at least it was supposed to be a smooth trip until a massive beast shows up. A huge bear is suddenly standing right in their path, towering over them, and the two of them absolutely lose it, screaming at the top of their lungs about the giant monster. Wish panics, grabbing his head and yelling about how he can't believe they hit a monster here, so he shouts that their only choice is to run as fast as they can. Wish isn't taking any chances and starts hauling Liliam away, grabbing her and bolting while she starts losing her mind, screaming at him about whether he's actually trying to kill her. Wish doesn't want to hear it and just snaps back that he's the one who almost died first. So Liliam tries to explain that this specific monster is bad news and is basically a nightmare for anyone trying to be an adventurer. Suddenly, a massive sound comes from the trees, making Wish look back just as the giant bear goes on a total rampage, smashing through the forest behind them like it's nothing. Wish is completely terrified now, yelling about what that thing is and if it's even humanly possible for a bear to look like that. Liliam just screams that they are in some serious trouble because this thing is Gordon, a legendary monster that's famous for killing every single person it meets. Liliam begs Wish to do something to save them, but he just yells back that he can't do the impossible. Liliam is completely caught off guard by the situation, looking totally panicked as they keep sprinting through the forest, but Wish yells that if they don't change something fast, they're dead. He decides they have to make a move right now, which just leaves Liliam looking confused while Wish points out a tree and says they need to take a massive gamble. Wish grabs onto Liliam and gets ready to move, telling her to hold on tight before they dive into a hollow tree trunk just as the giant bear Gordon goes charging right past them. Inside the dark tree, Wish finally catches his breath and says he thinks they lost the monster for good. He sees Liliam is safe too, even though she looks totally wiped out from all the running. Wish starts looking at her and mentions he's been thinking about how she used to be a big deal in the Demon Lord's army, so he asks why she can't just wreck these monsters. Liliam is totally freaking out, sweating as she says she can't believe this is happening. She's stressed because she can't even use her magic right now. Wish is confused and asks if she isn't supposed to be the legendary ice and snow magic master. Liliam snaps back that that was a long time ago and now she's just a total weakling. She even blames him, saying demons only got weak because of people like him. Since he's a reincarnator, she says humans have no right to complain. Wish is just lost and asks her what she's even talking about, so Liliam looks him dead in the eye and says the reason she's gotten so weak is global warming. Wish looks completely drained, just repeating the words back to her like he can't believe his ears. Liliam keeps going, explaining how the temperature of the entire world is rising lately. She blames all the scientific technology the reincarnated people brought over, which leaves Wish totally speechless. She finishes her point by saying all that heat is making the water mana in the air completely disappear. Wish tells her to hold on a second and asks what mana even is. He's clearly clueless, so Liliam figures it makes sense since he's just a merchant. She decides to explain that mana is essentially the core of everything. She goes into detail, explaining how it's made of the four main elements: water, fire, wind, and earth. These act as building blocks, and by mixing them together, mages can create stuff like lightning or ice. But there's a huge problem: global warming has completely wrecked the water mana. It's gotten so weak that she can't even piece the mana together to make her ice spells work anymore. Wish asks why she doesn't just use something else then, making Liliam groan in total embarrassment. She blushes and snaps back that ice magic is the only thing she knows how to use, so Wish just stands there in shock. He can't believe this legendary, supreme mage is actually totally helpless. Wish is losing it, calling Liliam a total idiot for only knowing one type of magic. He can't believe she's this useless. But Liliam just yells at him to shut up and asks what's wrong with being a specialist while they both scramble to stay alive. The giant monster slams its fist down, nearly crushing them as they jump out of the way. Gordon the bear is absolutely massive and looks like he's ready to tear them apart. The woods are crawling with danger now. Wish realizes the monsters have tracked him down, and even Liliam looks like she's starting to panic. They're completely cornered with nowhere left to run, so Liliam decides she has to take a stand. She grabs a bunch of rocks and screams at the monster to come and get her, but then she starts hyping up her big finishing move. She claims she's going to blast the thing to pieces, which makes Wish freak out immediately. He sees she's literally just holding a regular stone and realizes that he can't count on her power at all. If anyone is going to save them, it's going to have to be him. Wish stands his ground but starts second-guessing himself, wondering what he can actually do here. He knows he's not strong enough to win a head-on fight against a beast like this, yet he keeps his eyes locked on the bear as it charges in. He can't help but wonder if there's something he's missing about his opponent, while desperately wishing he could spot a single weakness. He needs some kind of opening to break through this mess. And suddenly, a mysterious voice rings out telling him that everything is okay. It catches him completely off guard, leaving the guy totally confused as he looks around to see who just spoke. He can't believe he actually heard a voice in the middle of all this chaos, but the voice speaks again, reassuring him that things are fine. Wish realizes the sound isn't coming from the woods, it's echoing directly inside his head. The voice gives him a direct order to aim for the light. As the massive bear closes the gap, Wish repeats the word back in total shock. He asks if the voice is really telling him there's a target, and right then Gordon the bear lunges forward with a bright, glowing spot appearing right on its chest. Wish sees the light and realizes this is his only chance. He grips his sword, ready to make his move. Wish looks completely stunned as a memory flashes through his head. He starts wondering if what's happening now is connected to that time, and Gordon the bear charges forward with a massive glowing spot on its chest. The guy notices a weird band of light stretching out. He asks himself if that trail is actually connected to the bear's weak point, while Liliam stands there totally freaking out and stuttering. In the middle of her panic, a mysterious voice just laughs and asks what it should do next. Wish stays quiet for a second, just staring at the scene. He finally asks Liliam if she's noticed the glowing light yet, but looking at his own hands, he starts to realize something might be up. He wonders if he's the only one who can actually see this light, and right then Gordon lets out a deafening roar and lunges at them with its claws out. Liliam absolutely loses it and screams in terror, but Wish doesn't hesitate. He jumps straight into the air and gets ready to swing because even though he's struggling, he's locked in. He admits he has no clue what this light is, but he follows the path anyway. As he moves through the glowing trails, he can't help but wonder what this light is going to bring them. Wish puts every bit of strength he has into a final swing, driving his blade straight into the glowing spot on Gordon's chest, and the impact is so massive that a giant explosion of light fills the entire area, completely blinding everything for a second. The bear gets blown back by the sheer force of the hit, and as the dust starts to settle, Wish groans as he tries to keep his balance. He can't believe how heavy his body feels all of a sudden, but he's not the only one struggling because Liliam starts to panic and calls out his name. She's losing her strength too and can barely stand up, but then Wish tries to say he's doing okay while he's hunched over on the grass. Right then, a strange voice tells him his body just hasn't adjusted to the power he used yet. He looks over, totally confused about where that voice is coming from. A little girl suddenly jumps into view with a huge smile. She seems thrilled and congratulates Wish on his big win, acting like she's been watching the whole time. Wish is just staring at her, wondering why there's a literal child out here and asks her what she's doing. The girl strikes a pose and introduces herself as Milfina. While Liliam looks on suspiciously, Milfina starts explaining that she knows all about Wish's hidden ability. Milfina keeps talking, explaining that since Wish didn't seem to understand what was going on with his body, she felt like she had to speak up and tells him that he has a special power that belongs only to him. Wish just stares at her, completely caught off guard by the idea that he has some secret ability, and Liliam watches the two of them, whispering to herself about how weird this whole situation is getting. She's not buying any of it, so she asks Wish what his plan is, since the girl has been rambling about nonsense for a while now. Liliam is losing her patience and points at the kid, yelling that she's clearly dangerous and shouldn't be trusted. Wish looks over, unsure how to react while he admits that the girl is definitely acting suspicious, but he feels like there might be something more to her story. Hearing this, Milfina makes a grumpy face and snaps back at Liliam, telling her that she's being really mean. She doesn't stop there though, and pouts while telling Liliam that this attitude is exactly why she got fired from her job as a general in the Demon King's army. Liliam's face goes pale before she turns red with anger, clenching her fist and shouting at the girl to repeat what she just said. Wish tries to step in and stop the fight, demanding to know how a random kid could possibly know about Liliam's history, but Milfina just acts smug. Milfina thinks for a second and says she's down to chat, but it's probably better if they leave the woods first. Wish totally agrees, looking at the big bear and saying it's way too risky to hang around with monsters like that. Milfina sounds surprised and asks if he really thinks the bear is dangerous, since Gordon is actually one of the weakest monsters out there. Wish just stands there, totally confused. She keeps going, explaining how all the creatures in this forest became violent because of a dragon's miasma buried deep inside, which is why there are swarms of even scarier things hiding in the shadows. Liliam starts to freak out and tells everyone to wait, asking if she means the actual demon dragon. Wish is stunned. Just repeating the name Liliam gets a look of dread on her face as she remembers the legends about a dragon from a long time ago. A beast that could apparently level entire mountain ranges in the demon world with just a single breath. Milfina casually says that's the one, making Liliam completely lose her mind. She can't believe they're in a place like this, but Milfina just skips ahead like it's nothing, telling them the name of this place is the Fornium Forest. Milfina drops a bombshell, explaining that they're standing in the exact forest where the ancient dragon Fornies is sealed. Liliam completely loses it, screaming about how the actual symbol of terror is right here in these woods. She starts panicking and tells everyone they need to run right now, grabbing Wish's arm and dragging him along while he just tries to keep up. Milfina doesn't seem bothered at all and just tells them to follow her, taking a step forward, leading the group deeper into the forest as Wish and Liliam follow closely behind her. As they walk, Wish notices something weird and asks if those are actually wings growing out of her back. Milfina just smiles back at him, looking totally different, while Wish stands there barely able to finish his sentence. She finally reveals the truth, standing there with glowing wings and a halo, telling them she's actually the goddess Milfina, explaining that she came down from the heavens to finally put an end to the constant war between humans and demons. She looks pretty proud of herself, adding that she's the youngest daughter of the supreme god Lepes. Liliam stares at the glowing wings and the halo in total disbelief, her voice trailing off as she tries to process what she's seeing, sweating and visibly shaken. She admits she has no choice but to accept that Milfina really is a goddess. But it doesn't make sense to her. She mentions that gods are usually supposed to hate demons, yet Wish notices the same thing, wondering why Milfina isn't attacking them even though she knows exactly what Liliam is. Milfina's eyes light up like she just remembered something important, and she lets out a quick shout, grabbing onto Wish's sleeve and calling him Big Brother to get his attention while he looks back confused. She starts explaining the situation, telling him that this entire forest is actually surrounded by a massive barrier, a trap designed to confuse anyone who steps into the sea of trees and keep them stuck inside forever. The magic is apparently so powerful that it can seal away a demon dragon, and it works on humans too, which is why she's pretty sure that even someone like Wish won't be able to find a way out on his own. Wish looks back a bit confused while Liliam asks if this whole barrier situation isn't actually a huge problem, but Milfina just smiles and tells them not to worry. She says she can get through easily since she's a goddess, and then she just takes off, telling the two of them they better keep up or they'll get left behind. They eventually make it out under the stars, and Milfina lets out a sigh, happy they finally escaped, so Wish gives her a pat on the head and thanks her, while Noel just stands there looking confused. He tells her she really saved their lives back there, and Milfina just giggles like it was nothing. But then Wish stops and asks her why she was even hanging out in that forest to begin with. Milfina looks right at him and says she was there specifically so she could meet him and his friends. Wish realizes she's right, she did seem to know exactly who they were the second she saw them, so she explains she was watching them from the celestial realm, leaving Liliam totally stunned by the news. Milfina just laughs and says of course, teasing Liliam by saying she knows the two of them are actually super close, which catches the demon totally off guard. Liliam starts stammering, unable to even say the word close without freak out, so she yells at Wish that this is nothing more than a temporary truce, while Milfina just walks ahead with a smug grin. Milfina looks back and asks if she's really sure about that, then turns the question on Wish to see what he has to say about their relationship. Wish doesn't miss a beat and says he thinks of her as a precious comrade, which basically sends Liliam into a spiral. Liliam just huffs and turns her head away, trying to act like his words didn't affect her at all. And as they keep walking, Milfina moves the conversation along, wondering why humans and demons can't just get along instead of fighting all the time. Milfina keeps walking and mentions how her father always said peace is impossible unless every single demon is wiped out, which makes Wish look at her with a pretty worried expression. Milfina stops and starts explaining her side of things, saying she's always dreamed of a world where humans and demons could just live together without all the fighting. She looks back on the time she tried to share these ideas with her father and the other gods, but they didn't want to hear it, and just treated her like a total nuisance for even bringing it up. She even mentions how Wish ended up getting completely disowned by them for having those same beliefs, and it honestly made her feel pretty depressed, like she was useless and couldn't change anything. But then her eyes light up as she remembers the exact moment everything turned around, which was seeing Wish and Liliam together, because watching a human and a demon actually get along was the proof she needed. Milfina gets emotional, saying how happy she was back then. She really believed everything was just destiny, and Wish and Liliam just stand there completely stunned while she explains she thought the two of them could actually change the world. She looks up with a lot of hope in her eyes and tells them that's the whole reason she traveled all this way, declaring right then and there that she's come to give her brother Wish a special blessing. Wish just stares at her, barely able to process what she's saying as he repeats the word blessing to himself. Liliam lets out a heavy sigh, looking pretty tired of the drama as Milfina tries to get her attention. But Liliam doesn't hold back. She says if all this is true, then the human gods are honestly just the worst people ever. Wish starts panicking and tries to quiet her down, telling Milfina she shouldn't be saying things like that in front of Liliam. But Liliam just crosses her arms with a grumpy look, snapping that she hates what she hates and that's the end of it. She finishes by saying the whole thing should be pretty obvious to everyone by now. Liliam is still fuming, yelling about how anyone could just throw away a good girl like Milfina. She's really losing it now. shouting at the top of her lungs that the god Lepes is honestly the absolute worst for this. Wish just starts cracking up at her reaction, which makes Liliam stare him down and ask what his problem is, but he just shrugs it off, telling her he isn't laughing at her. He just thinks the whole thing is very much like her. Liliam turns back to the kid and tells her that if she's got nowhere else to go, she should just come along with them. Milfina looks pretty surprised by the offer, but Wish gives her a wink and says it's sudden, but he thinks it's a great idea. He reaches out his hand to her with a big smile, telling her that he'd definitely welcome her to the group too. Milfina starts blushing and looks really happy, thanking both her brother and Liliam for being so kind to her. She clasps her hands together in a serious way, focusing all her attention on Wish and starting a prayer, wishing with everything she has that her brother finally receives the blessing he deserves. Milfina's prayer starts working, and she says this is the true power of her brother Wish, an ability called Insight that lets him instantly see the weakness of any powerful enemy he faces. She smiles happily, explaining that from this moment on, he'll be able to see those weak spots in way more detail. Wish looks completely stunned as he starts to realize that all of this is coming from Milfina's divine protection, which begins to wrap around him while Liliam watches the little kid work her magic. Wish holds up his hand and asks what this weird light is, but he can already feel how good the energy feels, thinking to himself that he honestly feels like he could do anything right now. Liliam looks him up and down and tells him he doesn't actually look like he's changed at all, but then she backtracks a bit, saying he at least doesn't have that usual stupid look on his face. So Wish just gives her a smug grin, clearly feeling pretty good about his new upgrade. Wish isn't wasting any time and says he's going to test this new power out on her right now, but Liliam just brushes him off with a bored look, acting like she couldn't care less what he does. That's when Wish notices something crazy and points out that her whole body is literally glowing. He realizes that his new vision is working and says he can finally see her actual weakness. Wish starts cracking up while Liliam and Milfina just stand there looking completely confused, so he tells her she's basically just one giant weak spot, which makes Liliam lose her mind and scream. She starts throwing a total tantrum and yells that there's no way that's true. But then Wish hears some noise coming from somewhere else and spots something weird off in the distance. He looks out over the dark valley and sees a bunch of lights, realizing that what he's looking at is actually a village, even though the girls are still busy messing around and fighting in the back. The group makes it to the village, and an older man looks out at the town while trying to process what he was just told, asking Wish if he's serious about wanting to stay in this village for a while. Wish sits at a table with a drink nearby and gives a respectful answer, telling the man that if it's okay with him, the whole group was really hoping they could stick around. He calls the guy Mayor Zebman, but the old man is way too busy eating to give a real answer and just grunts while the group watches him from across the table, making Liliam realize the mayor is a pretty laid-back guy. The two of them just sit there in total silence for a second, not really knowing how to react to the mayor's vibe. But Wish starts thinking about how he was stressed over Liliam's demon look earlier. It turns out that just drinking a basic recovery potion fixed everything. Her ears look completely human now. Wish realizes that at first glance, a demon can look just like anyone else, which is pretty crazy to think about. Mayor Zebman says he'd actually love for them to take their time and stay for a bit, which shocks Wish and Liliam. But then he gets serious and says the village has some weird history that they need to hear. Liliam asks what he means while Wish stays quiet and listens as the mayor explains that 40 years ago during the Demon King's invasion, a bunch of people fled the capital to start 53 new settlements, including this very place, Zachen village. But even after all this time, the kingdom still refuses to recognize them as an official town. It's like the government blames the refugees for everything, treating them like total outsiders. He points out that the sacred forest between them and the capital is the only reason the village is even protected at all, but he has to give them a fair warning. If they stick around, the kingdom might label them as rebels for siding with the village. The mayor reminds them that they're merchants, so staying in a rebel-leaning village might ruin their business, so he suggests they stay in a small hut just outside the village limits for the night. But Wish speaks up right away, asking the mayor if they can actually just stay in the village instead. The mayor is surprised by the request and asks the kid if he's really sure about that, so Liliam jumps in to back Wish up, telling the old man that it's not a problem for them. She explains that she's already gotten a good feel for the chief's character. And besides, watching the local kids play makes her feel like this place isn't a bad spot to be at all. The mayor accepts their answer and offers to show the group where they'll be staying for the night. As they walk through the town, Wish notices the villagers whispering and feels like something is off. He looks around at the people, wondering what exactly is going on with this place, and Milfina looks around and notes that the vibe in the village is starting to get really tense. Suddenly, a loud voice cuts through the air, calling the villagers a bunch of peasants. An angry thug grabs one of the guys from the village by his shirt, yelling at him to stop acting like he's so high and mighty. He gets even more aggressive, shouting for them to hurry up and hand over all their goods, leaning right into the terrified man's face. He warns him not to even think about hiding anything from them. The thug flashes a nasty grin, telling everyone that anyone who tries to defy him is going to get the death penalty. A little girl nearby just stands there shaking in fear while the mayor watches the whole thing happen. The thug barks at them again to hand it over, shoving the villager back as the poor guy lets out a cry. Wish is completely shocked by what he's seeing and asks who that guy even is, while Liliam comments on how cruel the situation is. The mayor looks down at the ground, sounding totally defeated as he says those people have come back to the village again. The mayor looks completely worn out as he explains that the guy causing all the trouble is actually an official serving the local lord. His name is Logan, and he and his men show up at the village whenever they want, pretending they're just there to collect taxes for the kingdom. But the mayor knows better, calling Logan a despicable man who just uses his power to rob the people of their food and everything valuable they own. Liliam is confused and asks what he means by that, so Wish points out that the kingdom hasn't actually done a single thing to help or protect this place. Liliam realizes the situation is even worse than she thought, muttering that it's all just too much while Wish stands there in total silence. Back at the village center, Logan clicks his tongue while looking through the loot, complaining that there's barely anything good and calling the village pathetic. He loses his temper and kicks a wooden barrel to pieces, shouting at the terrified villagers to bring him something more unique than this junk. Watching from the side, Liliam is absolutely fuming and calls Logan a total piece of trash, and she's not about to just stand there. She says she's going to teach that guy a lesson he won't forget, but the mayor panics and tries to stop her before she can make a move. Wish steps in too, reminding her that these guys are official kingdom workers, so he can't let her get in trouble by starting a fight with them. One of the thugs looks down and is shocked to see the little girl standing there, calling out Milfina's name while he glares at her with a look that could kill. He asks the kid what she's looking at, but Milfina doesn't blink, just looking him right in the eye and asking if he's actually a piece of trash. The guy completely loses it and swings his giant sword down, but Wish is faster and scoops her up just in time. Wish grunts from the effort of the save, while Milfina looks up at him wondering what he's doing. The thug just scratches his head like he's annoyed, complaining about how much he hates dealing with disrespectful commoners, and he makes a huge deal out of a little bit of mud that splashed onto his boots. He looks down with a cold stare and tells them to die, which makes Wish panic and shout at Milfina to apologize right now. The guy notices Wish's defiant vibe and asks what's with the attitude, taunting him to see if he actually wants to fight, and the mayor starts losing it, screaming for Wish to stop because he doesn't want the kid sacrificing himself for the sake of the village. Wish looks down with his face shadowed as he tells Milfina to run away right now, but she just stares up at him, thinking about how this isn't some noble sacrifice. Images of her friends being hurt and treated like garbage flash through her mind, while Wish stands his ground, declaring he won't be satisfied until he sends this guy flying. His eyes start glowing with this crazy energy as he yells that's all there is to it, and Milfina realizes that from this moment on, his power is going to let him see every single weakness. Wish feels the change too, saying he can see everything more vividly than ever before as Milfina confirms that his true ability has finally awakened. Suddenly, status screens pop up all over the place showing the thug's levels and stats, and Wish levels his sword at the leader, calling him a piece of trash and daring him to move. Wish looks totally locked in with his eyes glowing as he shouts that he's taking this guy on. Logan starts walking forward, looking annoyed and telling Wish that he really doesn't like his attitude. Logan gives this creepy, smug grin while asking the kid if he honestly thinks he stands a chance, while one of the thugs in the back tries to warn Logan that starting a fight like this is a bad move. Logan just yells at his guy to shut up and stay out of it, and the guy quickly backs off while Wish fires back, saying he's actually pretty pissed off at Logan too. Wish doesn't hold anything back. He calls him a piece of trash and tells him to bring it on. Logan says that's fine by him as he grips his sword, threatening to half-kill Wish to set an example, keeping that cocky look on his face while saying he's going to carve a lesson deep into his skin so he can make sure Wish never dares to defy him again, swinging his massive blade right at him. Logan puts everything into a massive swing, but Wish holds firm and takes the hit head-on. Logan clicks his tongue in total disbelief, realizing the kid actually blocked a strike that heavy. While they're locked in, Wish sees Logan's stats pop up. He's only level 13. He realizes that thanks to Milfina's blessing, he can read this guy like an open book, making Logan's follow-up attack look slow as he smashes the ground, sending rocks flying everywhere while he yells at Wish for seemingly looking away. He thinks he's got the upper hand, but Wish just smiles, his eyes glowing as he says it's not a problem because he sees every move coming. Logan lets out a frustrated roar and swings wide, but Wish is already gone, blurring right past him. Wish gets in close and tells him that it's his turn now, gripping his dagger with a look that says he's done playing around. He spins through the air, moving so fast that Logan can't even keep track of him, leaving the guy struggling to even lift his sword. Logan starts to freak out, wondering what the hell this kid actually is. Logan's face goes pale as he realizes Wish didn't just dodge his heavy strike. He actually landed a counter, sending Logan skidding back across the dirt. He can't wrap his head around the fact that he's losing to a kid like this, making him struggle just to keep his guard up. He realizes he can't fend off all the attacks coming his way, so he just stands there in the middle of the village, completely stunned by how unbelievable the situation has become. Everyone watching is losing their minds. One of the villagers mentions how one-sided the fight is, while Mayor Zebman starts wondering if Wish is actually just a merchant, so Liliam just smiles and tells them that for Wish, this is basically a piece of cake. She lets it slip that he was actually a member of the hero's party, which completely floors the mayor. He can't believe it, so Liliam starts explaining how things work for adventurers, showing off a chart where everyone is ranked from D all the way up to S. It shows the brave Levin at level 70, the rest of the party around 60, and even a low-level demon being way above a normal person. But Milina jumps in to simplify things, explaining that individual strength can be measured just by looking at this. And she brags about how Wish is so strong that even as a merchant, he can take out a low-level demon in a single hit. The mayor just listens, totally impressed by what he's hearing. Liliam just smiles, pointing out that Logan looks like he's basically unranked compared to how strong Wish is, and she's totally sure that Wish is going to come out on top in this fight. Logan curses as he struggles on the ground, telling himself there's no way he can lose to a brat like this. So as Wish moves in, he says he's been waiting for this exact moment, and Logan snaps back that he was actually waiting for Wish to get right into his range. Logan yells that he isn't going down and that losing just isn't an option for him, as Liliam looks on in shock, noticing that Logan's sword has suddenly caught fire. Gritting his teeth, Logan puts everything he's got into a special swordsmanship skill, unleashing a massive flaming slash that tears up the ground as it heads straight for Wish. Logan starts breathing hard and laughing, bragging about landing a direct hit and telling Wish that he got exactly what he deserved. Logan screams out in triumph as his flaming attack hits, thinking he finally won. The smoke starts to clear while the villagers watch the aftermath of the massive explosion. But Logan's face goes completely pale and his eyes go wide. As he looks at Wish standing there totally fine, Logan mutters that this has to be impossible. Milina yells for Wish to see if he's okay, while Logan just stands there losing his mind that his finishing move did nothing. Logan can't wrap his head around how Wish is still standing after taking a hit like that head-on. Wish just rubs the back of his head and laughs, saying they're lucky the guy using the skill was such a rookie. Logan just stands there shaking and sweating, barely able to even speak after getting insulted like that. Wish thinks back to when he checked the guy's status, admitting he was actually a bit surprised to see Logan had high-tier skills, but he compares it to the hero Levin, who has the kind of power that could wipe out a whole castle in one shot. Wish stands there with a big grin, pointing right at Logan, and asking if he's ready to keep going, but Logan is a total mess, shaking and sweating as he realizes what kind of monster he's actually fighting. He digs his fingers into the ground, completely broken, admitting to himself that there's no way he can win this. Logan collapses onto his knees in the dirt, finally giving up and muttering about how he lost. And just like that, the whole village explodes into cheers, leaving Wish and Liliam looking a bit surprised by the noise. Milina celebrates the big win while Wish just laughs, watching the villagers finally feel safe again in the background. But the peace doesn't last long. A massive tornado suddenly rips through the middle of the village, catching everyone off guard. Wish tries to stay on his feet while things get blown around, noticing the wind is getting way too strong, way too fast. He covers his ears as a deafening sound hits them, wondering if that noise is actually the roar of some kind of beast. Liliam stares up at the sky, her face going totally pale as she realizes that something impossible is showing up. A massive demon dragon suddenly shows up, towering over everything with its huge wings and scales. Wish looks up and can't believe his eyes, asking if that's really the legendary demon dragon Fornes. The beast lands right in the middle of the village, and everyone starts losing it, screaming that a monster appeared as a villager tries to get the chief to run for safety. But Logan just sits there, saying it's all pointless. He stares at the creature, explaining that it's the actual guardian from the old legends about the Sea of Trees, and looking at the darkening sky, he mutters that the whole world is basically finished. One of the thugs tries to make a break for it, screaming at the top of his lungs for someone to save him, but Logan grabs him by the collar, yelling at the guy not to even think about running away. Logan gets desperate and begs the guy to stay, promising to pay whatever it takes if he just protects him, but the dragon is already moving, its massive claw smashing into the ground right where they're trying to escape. Wish watches the chaos and wonders if the dragon is actually targeting Logan and his crew, and he draws his sword to step in while Logan just stands there in the background looking totally useless. Wish curses his own luck but tells himself he just couldn't walk away without trying to help out. Suddenly, the dragon's massive mouth opens right in front of him, and he just freezes up at the sight. The pressure coming off the beast is insane, making Wish realize he's basically standing face to face with death, and he finally understands why everyone calls this monster the symbol of terror. Liliam screams his name while Milina asks if he's even okay, but Wish tells them not to worry about him and to just focus on getting the villagers to safety, which Liliam hates, calling him an idiot because there's no way he can take on a monster like that alone. Milina looks up at him and adds that Fornes is actually as strong as a demon lord. Milina warns him again that this dragon is basically on the level of a demon lord, but Wish just stays calm and tells her it's fine. He stands his ground, reminding her that he's got her own divine protection keeping him safe. Wish looks back with a grin and asks her if he's right, leaving Milina totally stunned and unable to say a word. Liliam gets stressed out and starts scratching her head, yelling because things aren't going the way she wanted, so she points right at Wish and tells him she's going to finish up her side of the fight and get back to him as fast as she can. As she starts running off to handle the thugs, she screams back that she won't forgive him if he goes and gets himself killed. Wish watches her go and says he already knows that, then turns his full attention back to the massive dragon. He focuses in and manages to spot a weak point in the monster's defense. Wish admits to himself that the beast is as tough as a demon king, but he realizes its true weakness is sitting right there in plain sight, and he prepares to make his move. Wish realizes that from what he can see, the monster's only weak point is its front left leg, so he decides to see how far he can go using his own ability, right as the dragon lets out a deafening roar that shakes the whole area. He focuses his vision and realizes he can actually see every single one of Fornes' movements, but as he dodges a massive strike, he starts wondering how he's going to keep up this pace. His eyes lock onto the beast, and he tells himself that his best move for now is to just keep avoiding those attacks. The dragon's huge claw slams into the dirt right where he was standing, but Wish slides past it like it's nothing. He stops for a split second to catch his breath, trying to stay positive and telling himself he can do this. He knows that front left leg is the only thing left to hit, and if he can just land one solid strike on that weak point, it'll be over. Suddenly, the dragon gets right in his face, catching him totally off guard. It misses and blasts the ground into pieces, forcing Wish to stay on the move as he runs through the village streets. The village is falling apart as people run for their lives. The dragon's power is just leveling everything in sight. Liliam covers her ears from the deafening noise, wondering if that was really the dragon's roar before calling out for Wish in a panic. Dust and debris fill the air as the ground gets absolutely shredded, leaving Wish crouching low in the middle of the mess. He grits his teeth and focuses, telling himself that he just needs one clean shot at that weak point to turn this around. But looking up at the massive beast standing over him, the situation feels pretty hopeless, like winning might actually be impossible. He stares at the monster, thinking there's no way they can beat something this ridiculous. But then a foot plants firmly on the ground, and someone yells out that they won't let the dragon have its way. It's Liliam, and she shouts that she won't let Wish die on her watch, while Milina jumps in right behind her to help out. Wish looks up in total shock, barely able to believe his eyes as he calls out Liliam and Milina's names, giving Liliam the opening to charge straight at the beast, telling the dragon to prepare itself for a real fight. Liliam points a finger right at the dragon's face, yelling that they're about to end this, and they're gonna let the beast have it with their finishing punch. Wish is starting to lose it, cursing under his breath as he realizes how bad this is. He keeps telling himself he needs to find a way to get out of there. He grips the hilt of his sword so hard his knuckles go white, but his mind is racing. He just keeps asking himself what he's even supposed to do. The massive dragon stands its ground as the group circles around it, and the air feels heavy like the whole place is about to blow. Suddenly, a voice comes out of nowhere saying it's been a while since it fought anyone with actual backbone, and Wish and the girls just freeze. The dragon leans in close and says that was actually fun, before looking Wish dead in the eye and calling him a human, which is when the whole group jumps back in shock, with Wish asking if the monster really just talked, and Liliam can't even find the words to respond. The dragon just scoffs and says of course it can talk, bragging that it's on a completely different level than any average monster they've seen. But Liliam isn't impressed and starts shaking with absolute rage, pointing her finger again and shouting at the beast, asking it how it dares to try and kill Wish like that, while Milina stands right there ready to back up whatever move she makes next. Fornes finally settles down, and Wish looks up at the massive dragon, asking if that crazy roar from earlier was meant for them. But the dragon just gives a small smirk and says it was actually a thank you for putting up such a good fight. Liliam is completely losing it, asking what he even means by thanks, since that blast would have turned her into a pile of ash if it connected. So Fornes just looks at her like it's obvious and says that's exactly why he made sure to miss, leaving her totally stunned. The dragon actually apologizes then, saying he's sorry for causing the group so much trouble, and explains that the only reason he was even out here was because he was busy chasing down some other guys. The group freezes up as the pieces start to click, and Wish asks if he's talking about Logan and his thugs, which makes the dragon's eyes narrow as he growls about those bastards setting fire to the forest where he lives. Turns out Logan was just showing off his new skill like a total idiot, laughing while the trees burned and his buddies cheered him on. Forney says they really pissed him off by running away without even trying to put the fire out, leaving Wish and the others to realize just how much of a mess Logan started. Everything starts clicking for Logan, and he looks completely shaken as he realizes that's the real reason the dragon is so pissed. Forney's lines right into his face and yells that he absolutely hates the heat, which has Logan practically crying while he begs for mercy. Watching the chaos, Wish just kind of laughs it off and says he finally gets the gist of what's happening, but something still feels off to him. He points out that the sea of trees is supposed to have a barrier to keep everyone inside, so he asks Fornes how he even managed to get out in the first place. The dragon just looks at him and says he didn't really do anything special. That's when Milfina pipes up looking pretty nervous, calling out to Wish to admit that she actually deactivated the barrier for a bit when they left. She explains that since she's a goddess, she's the only one who can move the barrier and the dragon must have just slipped out right behind them. Milfina looks down at the ground and apologizes for the mess, feeling pretty bad about the whole thing, but Wish just gives her a look and says it's fine. He's actually just glad he finally knows why the dragon showed up. Milfina brightens up immediately, while in the background, Logan is tied up like a rug and screaming about how much he hates his life. Looking around at the wreckage, it's clear the buildings took a huge hit from everything that went down, but at least nobody got hurt, which has Wish feeling pretty relieved as he says it's a miracle they're even alive right now. Liliam leans back looking totally drained and admits she honestly thought she was a goner for a minute there. So Wish keeps the mood light and says that with the dragon situation settled, the nightmare is finally over. But then a sudden, loud scream cuts through the air as Mayor Zebman looks like his whole world is ending, which leaves Wish and Milfina standing there confused, while one of the villagers points toward a specific ruined building. Liliam and the others start looking worried as the realization hits that something is actually very wrong. So Wish walks over to the rubble where the mayor is kneeling on the ground and asks him what's up. The mayor looks like he's about to break down and explains that the destroyed building was actually the village storehouse, leaving the whole group completely losing it once they realize every bit of food for the village has been totally wiped out. Milfina starts panicking and asks if they can just beg for handouts from the other villages nearby, but the mayor shuts that down, explaining they usually trade and they don't have anything left of value anyway. Wish realizes things are getting way too serious, and Milfina is just standing there at a total loss. Wish looks over at the dragon and asks what they're supposed to do now, and Fornes just grunts, but then the dragon suggests the villagers go hunt in his forest, saying they can take all the meat and fruit they need. The mayor looks like he's about to cry and asks if that's actually okay, while Wish stays a bit skeptical about it. Wish shrugs and says it's not like he's uninvolved here, and the villagers agree that they'll do whatever helps. Suddenly, the entire village breaks out into a huge cheer because they finally have a plan to survive. Liliam looks relieved and says it seems like they'll manage after all, while Wish just lets out a tired laugh. Still, Wish can't help but worry they'll run into another crazy monster like that giant bear out in the woods. Wish realizes that things are finally set, looking out over the mountain, but the calm doesn't last as the scene shifts over to the dense trees known as the Forest of Memories, where deep within the woods, someone is running for their life, breathing hard, and trying to find a way out of the thick brush. A girl in a red hood clutches a basket of fruit, totally lost and wondering why she can't find her way back to the village. She starts crying as a pack of wolves closes in. She screams for help, hoping someone will hear her before the ground shakes as Fornes the dragon lands right in front of her, telling Wish and the others that they've made it to the spot. The girl is shocked but thanks Wish for saving her, and he just gives her a nod, telling her he's happy to help. Liliam looks around at the massive trees with a worried face, saying she never expected to return to this forest, and she stops for a second, looking down at her hand like something feels off or weirdly different. So Wish notices her hesitation and checks in, asking Liliam what's wrong while they stand in the clearing. Liliam looks around the woods and realizes there's something special about this forest. She says she can actually feel power surging through her body, and it's a crazy feeling. She tells the group she can feel this massive energy just bubbling up inside her like crazy, but Wish is just standing there looking confused. He tells her he doesn't feel anything at all, wondering what she's even talking about until they both suddenly freeze. Something catches their eye and they both shout out in total shock at what's happening because right in the middle of the woods, A pack of wolves is surrounding that girl in the red hood. Wish spots her and realizes she's in huge trouble, so he starts moving fast. He yells out that someone is being attacked by a monster and he needs to get over there right now, but as he gets closer, the wolves turn on him. They're growling and snapping at him, catching him off guard for a second, and Wish draws his sword while cursing under his breath. He realizes he's outnumbered and says there are just too many of them to deal with alone. Then Liliam suddenly leaps right past him. She tells him she'll handle this and heads straight for the pack while Wish looks up at her, stunned, and she has this confident look on her face. She tells everyone to just stay back and watch because she's finally going to show off her true power. Liliam jumps into action and yells out her attack. She blasts the wolves with a flurry of ice shards that leaves Wish and Milfina standing there in total silence, completely shocked by what they just saw. Wish loses it and screams, asking if she actually just used magic, but Liliam just acts cool and says it was nothing. She turns back to him with a proud grin and asks if that wasn't the most impressive thing he's ever seen. Liliam explains that she felt this crazy rush of mana filling her body and just knew she could do it. Meanwhile, Wish is still confused. He asks why it's happening so suddenly since she was never able to use magic before. Forney speaks up and says it all makes sense because they're currently deep inside the sea of trees, and Wish just looks up at the giant dragon and asks what he's talking about. The dragon explains that the forest is full of mana pools, and the energy gets way stronger the deeper you go. He asks if they've been here before, figuring they probably just stayed near the edge of the woods last time. Fornes looks down and explains that the mana pools wouldn't have done anything if they just stayed at the edge of the woods, where the energy is way too thin to matter, but Wish isn't convinced. He stammers that even if Liliam can use magic now, they're still in a bad spot while a wolf snarls right in his face. Wish points out that the magic doesn't seem to be helping them much, and Milfina shouts in total disbelief as the pack closes in. The Red Hood girl collapses on the ground crying for help. Wish rushes toward her just as the giant dragon starts to move his massive weight around. Wish panics and yells that things are getting really bad for the girl. Meanwhile, Fornes looks like he's finally had enough of these monsters. Fornes lets out a cold breath and glares at the pack with terrifying eyes, telling them to just get lost. The wolves absolutely lose it and start yelping in fear, scrambling over each other to get away from the dragon as fast as they can. Fornes walks off with a huff like it was a total waste of time, and Wish immediately checks on the girl to see if she's okay. She looks up with tears in her eyes and quietly says she is, thanking Wish for saving her from the pack. The girl thanks them again for stepping in and tells them she's actually a resident from the nearby Zachen village. The young girl looks up shyly and introduces herself as Noah Orib. Finally giving a name to the face they just saved, Wish scratches his head and asks Noah what she's even doing out in a dangerous place like this. She explains that she came out to gather some berries on an errand for her village, but she ended up getting turned around and lost. Noah repeats that she was just trying to help Zachen village, but Wish looks pretty awkward as he tries to explain their own side of things. He admits that the dragon guy behind him actually destroyed the whole village food storehouse. He starts yelling about how the food got totally blown away, which makes Noah realize why they're wandering the woods too. Wish says they're basically on a mission to find a new food source, and Noah can't believe that something that crazy actually happened. She looks around at the trees and mentions that just gathering stuff from the forest might not be enough to fix a disaster that big, leaving Wish a bit confused. So she explains that the building they lost wasn't just a shed, but the village's main ice house. Looking at the empty shelves in her mind, she wonders how they're going to find enough food to feed everyone now that their main supply is gone. Some narrator mentions that because of global warming in this world, food spoils way too fast. Liliam looks pretty concerned and asks what actually happens if someone eats food that's gone bad. Milfina warns her it causes a nasty upset stomach that's super painful. While Wish thinks about how much he wants to avoid that, Fornes the dragon asks if storing food is even necessary when they could just hunt for every meal. Liliam looks totally over it and says she'd hate having to do that every single time. Wish takes a nervous gulp as he realizes this whole food situation is a much bigger problem than he expected. He thinks to himself that a fridge would solve everything, but then he starts to have some doubts. Wish asks Milfina if she's ever heard of a refrigerator, but the word just leaves her looking blank. Milfina tries to explain that a fridge is a machine that keeps things cool regardless of the heat outside. She says it's a box powered by electricity, which sounds like total magic to everyone else. Wish, Liliam, and Milfina stand there looking totally lost. The word electricity sounds like complete gibberish to them, and Wish tries to simplify things, explaining that a fridge is just like an ice house that stays cold without needing ice. Liliam thinks that sounds incredibly useful, but Wish suddenly realizes something important while Noah Orib gives a shaky smile and points out that using tech like that is basically impossible in this world. Liliam tilts her head, wondering if this fridge thing is some kind of weird tool from the demon realm. But Milfina sets her straight, it's actually a special tool used by reincarnators. Then Milfina just comes out with it and tells everyone that Noah is a reincarnator herself. Noah is frozen in shock as Milfina explains she can tell because Noah smells just like a god, exactly like her father. Wish and Liliam can't even find the words, just staring at Noah in total disbelief after hearing that. Noah looks completely overwhelmed her secret is out, and she has no idea how to react to everyone knowing the truth. Wish and the others just stand there completely stunned, and Noah repeats the word reincarnator as the weight of the secret finally hits. Everything changes in a second when Wish shouts out in total shock, but Milfina looks even more worried as she starts to explain what reincarnators actually are. She mentions how these people are known for making insane, world-ending weapons basically. They're seen as dangerous threats that nobody wants to mess with. Noah notices the tension and gives a sad little smile, telling them all not to worry about her being some kind of monster. She admits she really is from another world, but clarifies she's just a powerless nobody who doesn't fit the scary story. Standing alone, she explains that unlike the legends who get all the glory, she didn't get any special powers or magic. Because she wasn't useful, the person who brought her to this world just abandoned her and left her to rot. So she spent a long time wandering around as a beggar before she finally ended up finding a home in Zachen village. Wish is absolutely losing it after hearing this. He can't believe someone would treat her like garbage just because she was poor and weak. He looks her right in the eyes, feeling nothing but sympathy for all the painful stuff she's had to endure since getting here. Wish looks down at Noah and tells her she's really been through a lot. But before things get too heavy, Fornies puts a massive claw on Wish's head and suggests they put all the complicated emotional stuff aside for now, mainly because the dragon is still curious and asks if it's finally time to talk about this refrigerator thing. Wish nervously agrees and turns to Noah, asking her to explain it to everyone, and she's more than happy to help out. She starts her explanation by looking back at what she mentioned earlier about her home world, saying that a refrigerator is basically just a super handy tool from her world that runs on a power source called electricity. However, she points out the obvious problem. Since it's a tool from another world, it won't actually work in this one. So Wish starts thinking about how to solve that, but Noah interrupts him with a different idea altogether. She asks him if there's even a real need to try and recreate a whole refrigerator from scratch in the first place. Noah points out that if the main goal is just to keep things cool, they could probably find a much easier way to do it. Wish keeps the ideas flowing and suggests that for a cooling system, they could just use ice magic. Liliam thinks it's a solid plan, but points out a huge catch: water mana is super low lately because of global warming. Wish gets pretty bummed out hearing that, but then Fornies chimes in and tells them not to worry about it. Wish looks up at the dragon totally confused until Fornies reminds him that there's a massive mana pool hidden deep inside this forest. And as they step into a hidden clearing filled with floating bubbles and glowing plants, the dragon explains that this place is basically a mountain of pure magic essence. Liliam is completely floored by the sight. She can't believe how much water magic essence is just sitting right there, and she notices that the mana in the air is way more active than usual. It's like the whole place is buzzing, and she mentions that she's never felt this comfortable in her entire life. Fornies watches her enjoy the vibes and asks her if she could use all that extra power to create ice that stays frozen forever. Liliam stops in her tracks, realizing the possibility, and clenches her fist with a look of total confidence, telling the dragon that she can definitely make it happen. Liliam gets totally fired up and tells everyone to bring it on, looking ready to. Wish watches her and starts getting a bit worried, asking the dragon what she's even doing. Fornies explains she's just focusing her mind and working her mana, since big magic takes a lot of concentration. Wish isn't really getting it, but as he repeats the words high-powered magic to himself, the air starts to change, and suddenly a massive shockwave rips through the area, catching the whole group completely off guard. Wish struggles to stay on his feet. Yelling out to ask what the hell is even happening, a giant spiral of pure magic energy shoots up into the sky like a tornado. The pressure is so heavy that Wish has to shield his face, feeling like he's about to get blown away, and he stares at the scene in front of him, wondering if this is actually Liliam's true power showing up. Liliam looks totally calm despite the chaos, saying she can feel the power surging and that it's been a long time since she felt this good. Liliam's hand starts glowing with an intense light as she announces that she's finally ready to start. And just like that, the entire landscape gets wrecked by a massive explosion of ice and crystals. Wish is stumbling back, completely losing his mind over the scale of the destruction, while Liliam just cheers for herself. And Milfina holds up a perfect ice lily, proudly announcing that Liliam's special move is officially complete. Liliam asks if they don't think it's the coolest thing ever, but Wish just stares in silence, thinking her naming sense is actually pretty bad. Even so, once he gets a look at the reality of the situation, he has to admit he never expected things to be this crazy, because her status screen shows she's level 100 with insane stats, making her even stronger than a legendary dragon like Fornies. Fornies watches the girls playing around and tells Wish that Liliam is a straight-up monster. And even though she was an executive for the Demon Lord, the dragon says she's actually on a whole different level than people think. Wish asks if the dragon said something, but Fornies just tells him to forget about it as they move on. Wish looks up and admits that the guy really was incredible. He's honestly pretty amazed by everything he just saw. Fornies just stares at him in silence for a second, then asks Wish if he isn't actually scared of that woman. Wish thinks it over and says he was definitely shocked by that level of power. And while he might hesitate to say he's not scared, he clarifies that any fear he has is strictly about how strong her magic is and nothing else. After all, Liliam is currently shivering and whining about how cold it is. She really doesn't look like a scary person right now. She keeps crying out for Wish while he realizes she's actually freezing from her own ice. Fornies just starts laughing his head off, but then the dragon gets serious for a moment and tells Wish that he actually doesn't hate that part of him. Milfina cheers that the magic ice is finally ready, so Wish gets everyone pumped up to finish building the fridge. They all let out a big shout together and get straight to work on the next step of their plan. The whole group sits down to look over the designs, and they finally start putting their heads together to build the refrigerator. Wish explains how they use special wood from the sea of trees because it's great at holding the cold, and then he mentions they even coated the inside with water magicule, so none of that chilly air can escape. The construction starts moving along really fast. Before they know it, the whole project is basically finished. The group lets out a massive cheer as they finish the job, high-fiving and celebrating their hard work. Wish gathers all the villagers around because he's finally ready to show them what they've been working on, and he tells everyone to take a good look inside the building, pointing toward the open stone doorway. He proudly announces to the crowd that this is officially the village's brand new food storehouse, showing off the frost-covered room and calling it a refrigerator. The place is packed with food and magic ice. One of the guys touches an ice flower and is shocked that it doesn't even melt when he pokes it. A girl from the village smiles and says it's great since it's so hot out, but perfectly cool in here. One of the guys in the crowd shouts that they finally don't have to worry about food anymore, and Mayor Zebman grabs Wish's hands, telling him they're truly grateful and that the whole village is overwhelmed. The rest of the villagers chime in, saying that because of Wish's group, the entire village is saved. The mayor actually starts tearing up because he's so thankful for everything they've done. Wish gets a bit flustered by all the attention, but Liliam just calmly tells him not to even mention it. Later, as they sit together, Liliam says she's just happy everyone was so glad, while Wish tries to act humble, saying he didn't do anything that special. Liliam looks at him like he's crazy and asks what he's talking about, since they're the ones who put those smiles on the villagers' faces. She says it was really nothing for them, and Wish can't help but smile, realizing she's right. He agrees with her, but then Milfina jumps on him, saying they really made something amazing, leaving Wish completely caught off guard. Milfina gets real close to Wish and asks if he's actually noticed what's going on. While they're standing in the back room, Liliam points out the refrigerator. Wish looks totally surprised when she says that this thing might actually change the world. He just stands there repeating her words, trying to wrap his head around how a fridge could be that big of a deal. Wish is still completely lost, wondering what is even happening right now, so Milfina looks up and says she'll explain it to him. She says the core of a refrigerator is made of magical ice that never melts on its own, and Wish just nods along. Then she gets all hyped up, telling them to just imagine if this technology spread across the entire world. The thought of it going everywhere really gets Wish thinking. Milfina finishes by saying that if they had these, tons of people would finally be able to keep their food fresh for a lot longer than they can today. Liliam and Milfina both agree with the idea. Wish is stumbling back, totally overwhelmed by how big this actually is. Wish starts to panic a bit, telling them to hold on. He needs a second to process the scale of what they're talking about. He starts picturing how things work now, like how moving food normally takes a massive amount of expensive ice, leading to prices shooting through the roof, making it so only the rich people can actually afford to eat fresh stuff. But everything changes with a refrigerator. Costs would drop immediately, making it way easier for regular people to get food. So Milfina points out that this machine lets them keep things fresh during transport for almost nothing. He imagines people everywhere talking about a distribution revolution, saying these fridges are gonna change the way everyone lives. Milfina leans in close with a smug look, asking him if she was right, basically rubbing it in that she told him so. Wish looks like he finally gets it. He admits that what she's built here is actually something incredible, and he shouts about how amazing the whole thing is, while Liliam stands there knowing the world is about to be different. Milfina stops for a second as the bigger picture starts to click, wondering what happens if this actually spreads, realizing that naturally, way less food is gonna rot and go to waste. She's looking at the math and imagines food reaching every corner of the world, which means prices are gonna tank across the board, and she bets even the poorest people working like slaves will finally be able to eat their fill. Wish just stands there, totally blown away as she points out that it's already happening right here. The refrigerator literally saved this entire village, and all the locals are beaming, telling them how grateful they really are for the massive change. One woman can't stop smiling, saying that with a fridge around, they don't ever have to worry about starving again. Everyone is gathered around, talking about how much better their lives are gonna be from here on out. The vibe is great. People are shouting about how cool and amazing the whole thing is while flowers bloom, and Mayor Zebman looks like he's about to lose it, saying they can't possibly thank Wish and the group enough. Wish looks out at the smiling villagers and realizes he's got a shot at changing things for people all over the world. He starts running toward the village, shouting that making the world more prosperous is exactly what a merchant is for. Liliam smiles and agrees, pointing out that if they use the refrigerator technology right, they can really pull this off. Wish looks at his group, thinking that with these friends by his side, anything is possible, and he gets himself totally hyped up to finally kick off the official refrigerator distribution plan. The whole group lets out a shout, ready to get started on their next big move. Later that night, the scene shifts to a different town under the stars, where everything seems quiet for now. Inside a local tavern, a guy is sitting by himself at a table, just staring at his drink in dead silence. It turns out to be Logan, and he's absolutely fuming, cursing, and wondering what the hell is wrong with that village. He looks pretty rough as he remembers how he barely managed to find an opening to escape from them, but Wish is still thinking back to that massive dragon, knowing that a regular person taming a demon like that is basically impossible. Back at the tavern, Logan is losing his mind and cursing about that merchant named Wish. He slams his wooden mug onto the table and yells about how much the whole situation pisses him off, sitting alone and fuming. He doesn't notice a hooded person at the table behind him watching his every move. Logan looks over and recognizes the guy as the porter, but the hooded figure just asks if he's still alive. The stranger leans in close, telling Logan he wants to hear the rest of that story. Logan starts sweating and begins to realize who he's actually talking to. The guy pulls his hood back to reveal his face, and Logan realizes it's the hero himself. He says the name Ravan out loud while the hero just stares him down with a cold look in his eye. Logan starts laughing nervously, telling Ravan he never would have thought he'd run into the actual hero in a place like this. Levin sits at the bar and yells for the barkeep to get him a drink. Logan starts sweating, mentioning that now that he thinks about it, he hasn't heard any rumors about the hero's party in a while. He tries to make small talk, asking Levin if he's just in town for a quest. Levin takes a drink and repeats the word lately, thinking about his party. But Logan loses it when he realizes the guy has no money. Levin thinks back to a moment where he found their supplies gone and demanded to know what was going on, and who used everything. Garius just laughs it off, asking if it wasn't because they totally gorged themselves on bullbear meat and expensive liquor. He just smiles and says how good that meal was, completely ignoring the problem. Levin stays pissed in the flashback, yelling about how they almost died because they didn't have enough potions left. Noelle reminds him that Wish is the one in charge of the items, while Pal tells the hero to stop taking his frustration out on her. Back in the present, Levin slams his hand on the table and demands to know more about Zachen village. Levin closes his eyes and says he understands exactly what's going on now, and he stands up from the bar, telling the shocked barkeep he might as well go pay that village a visit. With a pretty scary look on his face, he says he can't wait to see Wish again. The scene shifts to a room where someone is suddenly yelling, "It's Garius," and he's freaking out because his sword has a chip in it, while Noelle just looks confused. She snaps at him, asking how she's supposed to know anything about his gear, which just makes him more annoyed. Levin is right there clutching his head, stressed out that he has to deal with weapon maintenance on top of everything else. He says he's sick of all these problems popping up lately, especially with all the loan payments and penalty fees they owe. Garius isn't listening though, and he just keeps yelling at everyone not to mess with him. He asks Noelle if she actually wants to fight him right now, until Pal finally tells them both to just shut up and knock it off. Wish is gone, and thanks to him, the entire party's mood is totally trashed. Noelle looks completely stressed out, thinking about how every single problem they're having right now is because of that guy. She realizes that Wish didn't actually finish all of his work before he left the party, and clutching her head in a massive headache, she calls him an incompetent jerk for dragging them all down like this. The situation is getting desperate, so Noelle decides they have no choice but to find a brand new merchant, but Garius isn't being very subtle about it. He grabs a random guy on the street, yelling at him to stop messing around and asking if he's a merchant. The poor guy is absolutely terrified, shaking as he stammers out an apology while he tries to explain himself, but he's so scared he can't even get the words out. Noel starts going over the massive list of stuff Wish handled, like getting their gear ready and dealing with the guild. And on top of that, he was managing all their money, mapping out dungeons, and gathering intel before every mission. The random merchant Garius grabbed starts panicking, sweating bullets while he says there's no way he can handle all this work alone. Levin steps in looking absolutely livid, telling the guy he's got a big mouth for someone who's clearly this incompetent. He can't help but compare him to Wish, noting how even that useless baggage used to breeze through these chores without any issues, leaning in with a look so scary the poor guy just lets out a terrified scream, completely losing it. The guy runs for his life while Levin slams his hand down, screaming about why nothing is working out for them anymore. He tries to tell himself he's the hero and that things shouldn't be failing just because one idiot left the group, but his expression turns dark as he realizes he actually needs him, deciding he'll just have to let Wish back into the party, planning to just toss him out again the second he stops being useful, since he thinks Wish doesn't have any real value otherwise. In his head, he honestly believes Wish should feel honored just to be serving someone as great as him. Meanwhile, the rest of the party finally reaches the capital, with Pal groaning in exhaustion while Noel sighs in relief that they made it. The heroes' party finally tracks down Zachen village, and Garius immediately starts yelling about how they found the place where that bastard Wish is hiding. Pal takes one look at the surroundings and complains about how trashy the houses are, calling it a total dump, while Noel agrees that the whole place is just disgusting. Pal looks over at the others and asks what the move is, since based on what Levin heard from his contact, it sounds like Wish is actually busy building some kind of magic tool called a refrigerator. She starts wondering out loud if the guy will even want to come back to them willingly, which catches Noel off guard. But Garius just smirks and says they're doing him a huge favor by going out of their way to visit him in a place like this. He walks off bragging that Wish should be crying tears of joy that they even showed up, and the girls have to admit he's got a point. Noelle stops in her tracks when she notices something nearby. Her eyes lock onto a building as she tries to figure out what she's seeing. Down the road, Wish is hard at work carrying a heavy wooden crate filled with scrolls and gear, but he suddenly stops and stares ahead, asking himself what he's even looking at. Wish stops in his tracks when he hears a familiar voice nearby. Levin is standing right outside the shop, shouting about how this must be the magic tool everyone is talking about. Levin looks at the machine and asks what he's even supposed to do with it, while Wish just stands there shaking, unable to believe who he's seeing. Wish calls out the hero's name in total shock, which makes Levin and Garius stop what they're doing and turn around to see who's there. Liliam and Wish are both completely caught off guard, and Wish can't help but ask why the hero's party even showed up in this village. Levin acts like it's no big deal, saying a lot has happened with them lately. He casually mentions he's changed his mind and decided Wish is actually somewhat useful, leaving the guy just sighing while Levin keeps going, telling Wish that he's decided to give him another chance. Wish is still trying to process everything when Levin grabs his shoulder with a smug grin. The hero announces he's going to let him back into the party, and he leans in close with a fake nice look, asking if Wish is ready to come back as if there's no way he'd ever say no. Wish doesn't even hesitate. He looks Levin right in the face and gives him a flat no. Levin doesn't seem to care about the answer, saying they should just let bygones be bygones since, in his mind, this is all about saving the world. Levin looks Wish right in the eye and tells him the hero's party actually needs his power, but Wish just stands there looking completely stressed out as he gives his answer. He tells Levin he's happy they asked, but he's sorry because he's not going anywhere. He explains that everyone in the village has been treating him so well lately, and he's finally managed to make some real friends. Wish looks genuinely happy about his new life until he tries to explain how good the people are, but Levin just lets out a sudden laugh that cuts him off. Wish stares at him, totally confused by the reaction, and asks what's so funny. Levin gets this smug look on his face and says he's actually heard all about what Wish has been doing around the village. He mocks him for basically playing around and making little magic tools instead of fighting. Levin starts gesturing wildly, saying he's surprised a former member of the hero's party would sink this low. And he finishes by making fun of Wish for doing arts and crafts in a remote place like this. Levin sighs and says this whole thing is becoming a huge hassle. His hand goes straight to his sword as he looks at the village structures and calls Wish's hard work nothing but a bunch of toys. He suggests that if he just smashes everything to pieces, Wish might finally start being a bit more obedient. Wish yells out his name, looking completely panicked as he realizes Levin is actually serious about this. Levin just tells him not to be so mad while he gets his grip ready. He says Wish should feel honored because once the village is gone, there won't be anything left to hold him back. He keeps that scary grin on his face and shouts that Wish is definitely going back to work for the hero's party. Levin pulls off a high-level swordsmanship skill, and the force behind the move is massive. The strike hits hard, kicking up a giant cloud of smoke and dirt everywhere, leaving Wish watching as the attack connects, realizing with a chill that he's seen this exact technique before. Wish stares in total shock, realizing that this power is on a completely different level than anything he expected. He gets swallowed up by the massive energy blast, barely able to process how intense the pressure is as it tears through the village and sends shockwaves everywhere while the rest of the hero's party just stands back and watches. As the dust starts to settle, Levin looks at the wreckage and calls Wish an idiot for even trying to block a hit like that. He looks down and says he might as well keep going, stating that he's going to beat the hero party's sense of order back into Wish until he learns his place again. Levin stands over Wish, who's collapsed on the ground and can't even move after taking that direct hit, while Garius starts laughing from the sidelines, saying that this kind of display is exactly what makes Levin who he is. Noel chimes in too, telling the broken-down Wish that this is simply what happens to anyone who tries to defy them. Levin just gives a cocky smirk, acting like it's no big deal and wondering if he maybe went a little too far with that strike. Levin looks down at the mess and says it's a bit of a hassle, but it's fine. He decides he'll just drag Wish back to the capital as he is, but then Wish suddenly starts getting back up, letting out a heavy breath while Levin just stares, shouting about how this is even possible. Levin is losing it, gritting his teeth while asking Wish how on earth he's still standing after taking a hit like that. But Wish is just focused on his own survival, thinking to himself that things really almost ended right there. He thinks back to that split second when the blast hit, realizing he barely had time to react before he managed to snuff out the flames from the explosion, though even with that quick thinking, he's still in rough shape. His hand is completely numb from the impact, and he realizes Levin's power is way beyond anything he saw from Logan. Wish looks at his shaking hand and admits to himself that this is starting to become a real problem, especially since surviving that last hit didn't scare Levin off. It just seemed to fire up the guy's fighting spirit even more. The ground suddenly shatters as the fight explodes back into action, sending rocks flying everywhere as they keep going. Levin looks totally ticked off and asks Wish if he was actually aiming for his neck just now, clicking his tongue as he barely manages to keep his balance after Wish's counterattack almost catches him off guard. Levin lets out a massive swing, but Wish is way too fast. He ducks right under the blade and grunts from the effort, telling Levin to just stop this already. Wish doesn't slow down though, following up with a heavy swing of his own that forces Levin to jump back. Watching from the side, the girl asks if this whole thing seems weird, and Garius has to agree because he's standing there sweating, muttering to himself that there's no way this is actually happening. Garius can't believe that the porter is keeping up with a high-level hero, but right in front of him. The two of them clash again. Wish is completely locked in, surprised himself that he's still standing on equal footing, until Levin loses it and lets out a huge yell, charging back in with everything he's got. Levin is starting to lose his cool, sweating bullets and cursing under his breath because he can't land a single hit. He's literally screaming, asking Wish how he's dodging every swing so easily. It makes no sense to him since Wish is just a merchant, and he starts to wonder why he's feeling so rattled. Even Wish notices it now, realizing the hero's whole party is actually scared of him. Wish is just as surprised as they are, looking on as he realizes he's actually putting the fear into a hero. But Levin snaps, baring his teeth and yelling at Wish to stop messing around. He stands his ground, shouting that he won't be humiliated like this because he's supposed to be the hero. Yet he can't shake the thought of how pathetic it is to be afraid of a guy who just carries their bags. Levin loses it completely, screaming that he won't accept any of this as the ground starts to crack under his feet. He braces himself and powers up, ready to throw everything he's got into one last desperate move. Levin is going all out, thinking about how this next move has the widest range in his whole bag of tricks. He's convinced there's no way for Wish to escape the hit, so he lets the attack fly with everything he's got. Garius and Noel are losing it in the background, with Noel screaming at Levin to stop before he actually kills the guy. Wish watches the massive blade coming at him and realizes he's trapped. There's just no room to dodge a swing that big. Instead of panicking, he just closes his eyes and tells himself to focus, taking a deep breath to block out the noise. He starts comparing the speed to his old fights, realizing that even though Levin is quick, that Dragon Forney's was on a whole different level. Liliam flashes through his mind too, and he knows for a fact that she was way stronger than this hero dude. With his weakness detection skill dialed in, Wish feels like he can handle anyone, even the heavy hitters. It doesn't matter that he's facing off against a hero, because he's finally seeing the opening he needs. Wish readies a secret sword technique, and Levin's face completely drops when he realizes the merchant is about to strike back. Wish lets out his Meteor Burst technique, and the whole place just explodes in a flash of light while the rest of the party has to look away. Garius yells out because the power is just way too much, and right in the middle of the blast, Wish connects. He hits Levan's massive sword so hard that it starts to snap. Levan is completely losing it. He stares at the shards of his weapon and says it's impossible for his sword to break, but Wish doesn't stop there. He uses that momentum to spin around for another hit, staying right on top of Levan. He sends the broken hilt flying into the sky. Levan gets knocked off his feet as the merchant finishes him off, leaving the hero in total shock. He finally gets that it was the centrifugal force that wrecked him, but he still thinks this is a mistake. Wish looks him dead in the eye and says it's over. While Levan can't believe he's losing to a guy like this, he's still thinking about how he was supposed to be the winner when Wish lands the final, crushing blow. Levan just chokes and gasps as the impact hits, completely out of breath and realizing he's done. Wish stands over the defeated hero and points out that the blade on his weapon is actually chipped. He tells Levan it looks like he's been skipping out on maintenance, which is a massive weakness for any fighter. The merchant tries to end it there, suggesting they just stop because there's no point in fighting anymore. But Levan doesn't take that well at all, repeating the word meaningless with a look of pure rage. Energy starts swirling around the hero's hands as he tells Wish not to get ahead of himself. He yells out, asking if Wish really thinks a broken sword is enough to put a commoner above him. Wish notices the ground starting to react to the massive power surge and lets out a quick gasp, feeling the pressure build as Levan goes off, screaming about how he won't lose to a guy like him. Levan gathers every bit of magic he has left and screams at Wish to never dare give him orders again. The merchant can see the raw power coming off him and realizes the situation just turned south fast. Levan is caught right in the middle of a massive blast. He realizes he can't dodge it and the impact hits him hard. He looks down in total shock as the magic starts pinning him down and the rest of the party is getting hit too. Garius yells out in confusion while Noelle realizes her leg is stuck, completely trapped by the spell. Noelle can't believe what's happening, and Pal panics because she can't even resist the power. Levan is just standing there shaking. He mutters that this should be impossible, staring at Wish in total disbelief. He can't wrap his head around how magic could seal someone like him, a level 90 hero, but the dust starts to settle. Liliam steps out through the haze and addresses the group, and she is absolutely fuming. She glares at them and asks how they dared to do that, especially when it comes to her friends. She reaches out her hand, her eyes glowing with rage as she lets her power loose, demanding to know what the hell they think they're doing to her people. Liliam stands in the middle of a massive explosion of ice. Her power is totally out of control and Levan is losing it, asking what the hell this guy is while Wish just stares up, barely able to speak. Liliam's face is cold as ice while the group watches her, realizing she's like a totally different person. Levan looks over at his party members who are getting wrecked by the ice, and he realizes that Liliam is holding nothing back. She looks completely dangerous, and it's clear the party just got taken out. The area explodes with magic as Liliam pushes everyone back. Garius is struggling to even move, grunting as the weight of the magic starts hitting him. Levan is sweating, asking what kind of crazy bone-chilling magic power this even is, and then Noelle shouts her name, finally putting the pieces together and wondering if this is actually the legendary demon general. Pal is shaking, remembering that this is the same monster that led the demon army when they attacked the capital. Noelle can't believe it, asking if this is really that female executive who's supposed to be the strongest in the whole demon lord's army. Things are getting way too real and Garius is losing his mind on the ground, yelling that they've gotta be kidding him while the pressure of the magic keeps building up. Levan is gritting his teeth, wondering why a monster that powerful would even be in a place like this, and he lets out a grunt as he struggles to stay on his feet. He stops for a second, thinking that something doesn't add up and remembers how Wish ran away from the battlefield without even showing his face to anyone. Levan figures that if the guy had to hide, his actual fighting skills probably aren't that high after all. Noelle looks over and points out that he just has a ton of mana, but since he doesn't have any real skills to back it up, it might just be a bluff. That's all Levan needed to hear. He gets this nasty smirk on his face and says that taking down that demoness is actually going to be easy. He looks completely unhinged now, saying that once he's finished tormenting Wish, he's going to take his sweet time with everything else. A hand reaches out across the dirt, and a voice from the side suddenly says that something stinks. Everything explodes into a mess of ice and sharp shards as the power levels in the area just go through the roof, and Levan is forced to cover up, gritting his teeth as the sheer force of the blast tries to knock him off his feet. Garius yells out to Levan to see if he's okay, but Levan can only let out a pained grunt while the pressure keeps building. Liliam glares at him with total disgust, telling him he's got the nasty stench of a cruel and malicious human, but she's not done yet. She starts talking about her time back in the Demon Lord's army, how those executives treated her like garbage and put her through hell. Looking completely fed up, she tells them they'd better not underestimate her just because of how she looks now, and the magic she unleashes is so intense it starts ripping the entire area apart, sending massive chunks of ice flying everywhere. She remembers the way the other demons used to laugh at her, and she says just thinking about those memories makes her totally lose it. Wish stands back and watches the whole thing, realizing that she's reached a level where she's completely mastered ice magic. But suddenly his eyes widen as he notices something weird happening right in the middle of the chaos. Wish starts wondering if he even had a special title to begin with, only for the screen to show he's actually a former demon lord, and Liliam absolutely loses it when she sees the title, screaming at the top of her lungs because she can't believe she's standing next to a retired demon lord like it's nothing. Levin and Garius are just as floored, yelling about how there's no way the guy in front of them is actually the demon king, while Liliam just laughs it off and asks Wish if she forgot to mention it, which makes Wish snap back that she definitely never told him a single thing about it. She just shrugs the whole thing off like it's no big deal, telling him that whatever happened is all in the past anyway. As they walk away from the wreckage, Liliam says life is way more fun now so he should stop worrying, leaving Wish looking totally exhausted by her logic. Wish has to admit that her stats are honestly through the roof, and he asks if they've actually gone up since the last time he checked. Liliam gets all excited and confirms it, bragging about how she managed to stock up on a massive amount of mana at the pool, but Levin is still standing there looking like he's about to blow a fuse, gritting his teeth as he tries to get a word in. He finally yells out that they didn't come here for a fight, they just wanted to bring their old friend back home. Levin is losing his cool, yelling at Liliam that she's got no business getting involved in their business, but Liliam just mocks the idea of them being friends, asking if they're seriously talking about Wish, which makes Levin snap back, demanding to know what her point is. Liliam doesn't miss a beat and tells them they're out of luck because Wish is officially part of her group now, and she reminds them that nobody even invited them here in the first place. Then she asks if getting frozen solid wasn't enough of a lesson for them, leaving Levin gritting his teeth in total frustration. Wish stands there watching the drama unfold, looking completely shocked by how intense things are getting, until he finally finds his voice and calls out to Levin to stop the fighting. He looks Levin right in the eye and says he's sorry if his past actions offended him or the others, but he makes it very clear that he has zero interest in ever joining their party again. Levin looks right at him and says he finally found him, but Wish just stands his ground as he tells the group that this place is where he actually belongs now. He looks Levin in the eye and tells him he's definitely going to regret his choices, which makes Levin snap. He swears he'll be the one making Wish regret everything. Liliam looks like she's about to lose it with them, but Wish just starts walking away while he tells them he'll take them on when the time is right, and he makes it clear he'll be doing it together with his new party members. The huge dragon Fornes takes off into the sky, carrying everyone away, and Fornes looks back, asking Wish if he's actually sure about just letting those guys go. Wish just shrugs it off, saying that even if they're a mess, they're still technically the hero's party. Liliam looks completely floored by the scene in front of her, but Wish just stays calm, telling her he totally gets why she's so surprised since even Milfina is just standing there with her mouth open, staring up at the sky in pure awe. Noah Oribe looks pretty stressed out thinking about how they were just wandering the forest while all that was going down, but Wish just laughs it off, telling her he's actually just relieved he didn't end up right in the middle of that mess. Liliam suddenly calls out his name to get his attention, and as Wish looks over she points toward the horizon, getting all hyped up because their destination is finally coming into view. Right there in the distance is the massive capital city of Astrian, towering over the landscape, and once they finally make it inside the city walls, the atmosphere completely changes. Liliam lets out a big stretch, cheering about how well the refrigerator deal went, while Wish follows behind feeling good about the situation. He tells her that since the distribution route is set, they can officially start selling soon. Wish is all hyped up, telling everyone it's finally time, and Liliam notices something ahead that makes her shout out. Down the street, a local woman accidentally trips and loses her balance. She lets out a cry as her basket of fruit spills everywhere. She's on the ground grunting in pain and immediately starts apologizing for the mess while trying to gather her things, but Wish stops in his tracks, staring at her like he knows exactly who she is. Milfina just looks confused about why he's acting so weird. He goes quiet for a second as it all starts coming back to him, and he begins to realize this is the same place where everything began, thinking back to the day he first walked away from this town. He remembers how he used to walk these paths completely alone with no one to back him up, but things are different now that he's got Liliam and Milfina by his side. He's finally got friends he can actually trust, so he reaches down for a fallen piece of fruit, thinking about how there's no single right way to live life or any need to deal with unfair drama. Because of that, Wish kneels right down next to the woman and starts helping her put the fruit back into her basket. The woman looks up from the ground and realizes exactly who's standing over her. She's completely stunned and starts to recognize him, But Wish just reaches out a hand and tells her that if her life or current situation is getting too hard to handle, he's got a better idea, simply asking if she wants to leave it all behind and come with them instead.